Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Education Services Fill in the Gaps in Your Learning Organizations. Before we get started, I would like to remind everyone that they are on mute and that their video is off. But if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to use the chat feature to our panelists, and we will get your questions answered. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out as well as listed on our YouTube channel. To get started, I would like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Bill Spakowski, one of our K-12 Education Service Directors, as well as Ken Garcia, our other K-12 Education Service Director. And with that, I will hand it over to you guys. So go on ahead.
Well, thank you very much for kicking this off. And, I'll just walk through what we're going to be covering. So, there's a lot of questions right now regarding digital divide and what we should be doing to tackle that. And the goal of today is to talk through how partnering with Diopath, or how we would go about tackling this, and what we're doing with some of our clients. So Bill Spakowski is here, and if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about our company, what we do today, and help in helping others. So today, Diopath, as you may know us or be familiar with us, is we are a technology firm that services clients in the education space. We also do business in government and commercial. And our primary goal is really always looking at outcomes and what we can do to help. When we work with our clients, we look at our service portfolio ranging from advanced security, cloud services, connectivity, IT outsourcing, and professional services. Today, we're going to be talking about what we really do when we work with customers on the education space, where we are the trusted advisor and we provide advisement services. And that's really what I want Bill to focus on today as we're talking through this, what we can do to tackle this challenge and partner. So next slide, please. The Diopath education clients, this is just a simple image to show that we have clients ranging from K-8 districts up to high school districts to consolidated districts to colleges as well. So our services and our education experience ranges all the way from a small district to a very large district. We have seen the different challenges along the way and how we might be able to help our clients in all these different segments. So next slide. So our approach and how we work with our clients. So one of the things that we believe in is, one, accountability for technology, and really the other thing is outcomes. How do we help our clients achieve their goals? And when we work with our clients, especially in education, what we are hearing as far as the theme and what we're trying to impact is equitable student access. How do we ensure that our clients are able to leverage our services, their talents, their resources to fully impact that student and make sure that everybody has a fair and equal access to education? So that's really our approach first. Bill, anything you'd like to comment on here?
Yeah, I think as you summed it up, Ken, and you summed it up very well, is that the bottom line is that we want to make sure that as school districts invest in technology, that it's helping them achieve their end goal. Okay, and that end goal is really around student achievement, community engagement, and really, as we've seen probably over the last year, and it's been very true over the last year, is that the education sector has become the glue for the communities, particularly through what we've experienced over the past year. So our focus is to really elevate and make sure that they are a community leader and that they're really touching all of those that are part of their educational community. But it's about how does technology and the integration of technology elevate that experience for staff, students, parents, and community members.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's get into it. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So real fast, and Bill, if you wouldn't mind, when we talk about digital divide, I think there's a lot of questions around what is digital divide? What do you mean by digital equity? I've heard different levels of digital divide. And if you wouldn't mind just sort of elaborating on what each one of those terms mean to you, and maybe give some color around what that looks like to somebody that is listening to this and trying to understand what we're really talking about here.
Yeah, Ken, that's, I was thinking about this as we were getting ready for this presentation. And, when I think of digital divide, I'm looking back at my history of working with school districts, and I've been engaged with them now for over 20 years. And when I first started, the technology that were in schools was primarily used for the support of the business side of the schools, right? It was for the operational side, the accounting department, HR, payroll, those areas. And when I started, we looked at it, and a great example of maybe digital divide was the fact that we had computer labs, right, versus devices in the classrooms. And the more that we've moved forward, and this past 2 years have shown us, is that the digital divide, when we first started talking about it, was about stuff, right? Do we have the stuff? Do we have internet access, Wi-Fi access, both in school and out of school? Do we have devices for users? And when I first started looking at the term, it was about the stuff, and that's what it kind of came down to. Do we have stuff for everybody? And does everybody have access to that stuff, regardless of their social economic background or the community's social economic background? So when I look at that, that's where digital divide means to me. Now, digital equity, okay, is not only do we have the stuff, and we have the stuff in everybody's hands, but is the stuff adequate for what we're trying to do, right? Are we looking at the devices that we're handing to students and teachers and saying, okay, can it support what we're trying to do academically? Yes, they have things, but are the things appropriate to support where we're trying to go? And when we do have digital equity, we have devices in the hands of all stakeholders, all users, and those devices and the bandwidth supports what we're trying to accomplish. And we can use buzzwords like 21st century learning and some of those types of things, but we're making sure that if we have digital equity, all users have the appropriate devices and the appropriate speed to support what we're trying to do academically. Then we get into, sorry, Ken, did you have a question or comment?
No, I was just gonna, try to frame it up a little bit more and make sure, I'm following, the difference between digital divide and digital equity. So, where would a one-to-one project or, initiative within a district, is that often being used to help close the digital divide, or is that more focused on the equity portion?
Great question. And I think it falls into both categories depending on where the district is. If a district, and there are a number of districts, so I think it would be naive of us to think that even through what's gone on, in the past year and a half, that every student across the country in every community has a device and has access and has the sufficient bandwidth at home, whether it be broadband or satellite or whatever they might be using. But I think, going back to your question, Ken, digital divide and digital equity could be mirrored together depending on where a district is. A district might have been one-to-one, but yet their devices are old and it's not satisfying what they're doing. So they might have solved the digital divide, but not the digital equity.
Got it. Thanks.
What we're seeing now is that we have clients that are working with us that don't have the digital divide solved, but at the same time, we're addressing the digital equity as we're trying to solve for the digital divide. And again, those are things that districts have to evaluate. It's not, do we just have the stuff, but do we have the right stuff?
So Bill, does that come into that first level and second level of digital divide that are the next talking points, or, is that where you're going?
Yeah, so I think there's two pieces to that. I mean, the first level is saying, okay, we've solved for it, right? We've got all the stuff, we've got the adequate stuff, and we're able to make sure that everybody, regardless of their home situation, has the right tools in hand to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And there are a lot of places that get to that level, and that's great. But I think the research is showing as we look through the lens of the past year and a half is that this second level digital divide is where the challenge really starts to hit. And when we look at that second level, it's not just, do we have the stuff? Okay. Yes, we have the stuff, but are we creating the right learning environments? Are we doing professional learning? Are our staff, our students, our parents, and our community members, okay, receiving the knowledge that's needed to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish academically? And I think that's where we're really starting to see the struggle. And I think COVID has kind of put a lens on that. Those districts that have solved for the equity are now realizing that we may not be achieving that next level of creating an environment that is sustainable and that allows both staff, students, and community members to achieve where we're trying to go. And I think that's a big piece.
Got it. So Bill, would you say, an example of like the first level and the second level, and we saw this last year where many districts were just getting devices in the students' hands, right? And they were giving them to everybody and making sure that they had a way to get in or at least to connect. But then they might not have had, strong organization on when you're away, how do you connect? When you're away, what resources are you using for that day? How does a parent inspect the assignments and homeworks and stay connected? Is that what you start talking about where, sure, you might have devices, but do you have everything else to truly create that experience that everybody is working well, where, I know some parents last year had to get involved getting their kids online, and others didn't actually have access to get their parent to help, or or their parent might not have been in a position to help. Is that more what we're talking about there?
Yeah, Ken, I think that's a great example of what you're talking about with bringing parents and engaging them and saying, okay, how do we support them? But let's take one step back. It's not just about, that, have we prepared our staff to be successful in this environment? Okay, to truly understand what these tools are and how to leverage these tools to elevate that lesson for the students. But then more importantly, once they've figured out and they've engaged their students in it, are we communicating that to the parents? Homework's changed, right? I mean, if we think about the way parents supported their students prior to this digital age, it was paper and pencil, and they came home and they helped them with their math. Well, if we're using online math programs that help students learn because it's got repetition, it's got practice, it's got all of those things on it, but yet parents don't understand it, we're doing kind of a disservice to our learning community that way, because now parents don't understand. So yeah, it's not just, do we have the tools, but do all stakeholders in our learning community understand the impact and what that tool is supposed to be used for? And are we providing that opportunity to make sure that everybody knows the why? Basically, why are we doing it? And how do we accomplish it?
Got it. So I think that frames up, what the challenge is that's out there today, right? When we're looking at that digital divide, now the question is, how do we actually go about tackling this challenge that either we're experiencing or we might not even know exists yet? If you wouldn't mind, go to the next slide. Let's start getting into that a little bit. So Bill, I think anytime you're tackling something, the real question is, do you have a plan, right? Do you have a methodology? Do you have a plan? And let's talk about, when we're working with our clients, how do we go about engaging them and solidifying that plan for them, or helping them build it? And what are the key parts to that to set them up for success?
Yeah, Ken, the plan is what allows us to be successful, and I think when we look at schools, there's certain things that they are already inherently doing. They do things like, strategic planning, right, from a district level. And that's an overarching kind of plan for the district itself. But one of the things we've found is that often technology is mentioned in the strategic plan, but they don't take the rigor and the due diligence to drill down into the technology integration to build out and put the same type of effort behind how is technology going to be used, and how is it going to change that learning environment for all of our stakeholders, right? So what we try to do is really take that methodology and apply it to just the piece of technology that helps support the overarching strategic plan. And when we look at that, you have to be all inclusive, right? You've got to think about what's working in district, what's working in the classroom, and what's going to be working, for those students, from a remote environment and learning at home. Keep in mind, everything we are talking about today is we're talking about education that is not only inside the brick and mortar and inside our bell schedule, okay, but it's outside. And education is now 24/7 by 365. And we have to think about that. So we have to think about all of those areas. We've got to use evidence. We've got to understand what's going on in our district. We've got to survey. We've got to do town hall meetings. We've got to use tools to find out where our stakeholders, and I know education does not like the word stakeholder, and I know we're using it here in this slide, but we're trying to drive home the fact that it's not just about staff. It's not about administration. It's not just about students, although they are probably, they're our product at the end of the day. But we also have to think about the parents and the community members that even aren't parents, right? Because they're a support channel to what we're trying to do from an academic standpoint as well. We have to define our outcomes. Ken, you asked me the question about second level digital divide. And one of the reasons we find that districts fall short or are looking for support from someone like us at Diopath is that they haven't defined their outcomes. They haven't defined why. It's like over the past year and a half, how many districts have gone out and bought devices because the federal government has provided additional funding so that they can get devices in the hands of students so that they can take them home, and also hotspots or Wi-Fi, and they're spending, but is there a clear defined why with goals that are measurable so that we know we're going where we're supposed to be going? My experience over the past 20 years is that when I walk into most school districts, I can ask 100 teachers, why do we have technology in the classroom? And often I cannot get the same answer from those teachers across the board. So when I look at that, and I apologize if anybody's on this webinar that has this nailed down, but I'm speaking from our experience, is that most districts do not have the why defined, nor do they have the measurable outcomes defined. And again, we talked about stakeholders. I'm not going to go into that one, but you've got to have representation. If you're building a plan and you're going to do this well, you have to have representation from all stakeholders. Probably the most important stakeholder that is left out as this plan is going on is the student's voice. And if there's anything that someone walks away from today, is that please, when you're doing this, make sure that students are a voice in this plan. I've seen and I've experienced that students at the 4th and 5th grade level can contribute and identify things that teachers, administrators, parents, board members are not even thinking about. So please make sure you do that. Survey, find out what's going on. And that kind of ties to our next point, which is understand reality. Part of the plan is not being afraid, okay, to look at it and recognize where you are. It helps you define that benchmark so that once your outcomes and your goals are laid out, now knowing where you are allows you to build that framework and allows you to build that roadmap to be successful. Set expectations. And when I say expectations, what we found is let's not set our expectations for the calendar year, but let's start setting quarterly, semi-annual expectations. Because at that way, when we look at the integration and the development of technology into the schools, what we're looking at is we're climbing that ladder to mastery, right? And each step on that rung is successful. This is a journey. This is a 3 to 5 year journey, and it never ends. So the more often we refresh our expectations, it gives us that ability to climb and take those steps on that ladder of mastery. Identify the resources that are needed, and that's something you'll flush out throughout the plan. Instructional coaches, additional support staff, what other vendors, what other tools are needed to be successful.
Got it. So Bill, as you're talking about, as you're going through all this, I look at this as this is a lot of work. And, thinking about our districts today and how taxed they are with just, I'm going to say surviving to a certain degree and getting through things. How do you take something so big and really move it through a district while keeping all the stakeholders, connected and on the same page and having a voice? How do you address that? Or what are strategies districts can use?
So Ken, that's a really, really good question. And it's what is that old joke? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Yeah.
But I don't know a better way to say it. But typically, what happens is the districts we work with form a technology integration committee. Okay, which and we talked about identifying the stakeholders that should be part of that. But basically, we have a plan and a roadmap that says, hey, there's roughly 1,600 tasks that we have to accomplish to get ourselves in a good place, not to reach this mastery, right? But to put in a framework and a process that allows you to continually evolve what you're trying to do with the integration of technology. And that's evolved from a year ago to today versus what we're trying to do. And 2 years from now, it'll re-evolve and it'll become a new product 2 years from now because we don't know what we don't know.
Got it. All right. So Bill, what it sounds like from what I'm hearing is, our advisement services, we have tools, we have templates, we have frameworks that our clients or prospects, whoever's interested, could potentially partner with us on to leverage, to have these dialogues with their staff, to organize the committee, if you will, that's required to actually execute on this. And we could, from my perspective, anytime you actually have a roadmap and you're plugging things in or you're adjusting, your speed to execution increases, or your ability to succeed increases because it's a proven methodology. Is that what we bring to the table when we're talking about this with our clients?
Absolutely, Ken. And I think probably to maybe take that one level farther is that the roadmap and the framework that we have has examples, okay, of what other districts have done. So that speed to execution or that speed to introduction or implementation can be much faster because there are lessons learned. There's real world examples from other districts. And again, the goal is not to copy someone, okay? But the goal is to say, hey, if I can find 80% of what I need and I only have to customize 20% to make it unique to my district, my community, then that definitely brings us, to the end game much faster.
Hey, Bill, when we're talking about these plans, sometimes, I think about it, and I think the key element is making sure you have all the right stakeholders and that, that understanding reality. Because I know we've been in meetings where, a district may have some assumptions, right? Assumptions regarding, the how connected their community is. They might have assumptions with how connected they think their parents are or aren't. They may have assumptions regarding, internet access being everywhere nowadays, or taking that for granted, that, they just assume it is everywhere. I think we've also seen where sometimes within a household, there are multiple kids, right? And they're fighting for internet, for instance, or bandwidth or devices, or parents need to try to use that device to fill out an application for a job. All those things come out of this. And I want to make sure when we're working with our clients and engaging in this process, how do you communicate, and how do you get them excited, and how do you bring them into that fold? If you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit, maybe. I know you've done some things out there. What are you normally doing to get everybody excited about this?
So Ken, I think you answered the question as you asked the question.
Okay.
No, no. And when I say that, the key is communication.
Okay.
And it's not just communication to your internal staff, but it's communication to all of those that are part of your learning community. And our experience has been that could be, whether it be through email or whether it be through our messaging system, that goes to those parents that have cell phones versus email access, town hall meetings. Okay. The energy and the support and the excitement is generated by being able to show to your stakeholders what you're trying to accomplish and make them feel like they are part of the solution. Once you get all of that going, the synergy is just amazing. And the success rate goes up dramatically by having everybody engaged.
Got it. And I think that reminded me that often, this committee that you would create to tackle this often may have subcommittees. Is that right? Where you might
Absolutely.
have a communication committee, you might need a finance committee to make sure the money's there. You might need professional development committee. Like, are these all subcommittees that are all focused on these elements?
Yes, absolutely. And typically, depending on the size of the district, this technology integration committee that I spoke of earlier could range anywhere, again, depending on the size of the district, from 10 people to 45 participants. Okay. And when I say participants, I am again including all of the stakeholders. The best that we've done have parents, students, staff, administrator, and actually board members and community members that are not parents. And when you get that participation, you're touching every group out there. And it helps you with your communication plan as well, because now you've got representation from everybody so that you're communicating what's important to those folks that are out there.
Got it. So, obviously we spent a lot of time talking about planning, but, I think that goes along, right, with, if you have a good plan, everything else is easier. If you're making up your plan as you go along, you get into some trouble. So, thank you. Anything else you want to talk about planning? Because I think we need to move into, like, how do we implement and do this?
No, I think we can move off of planning. I think we've buried that slide.
All right, great. Let's talk about implementation. So, we put that plan together, and we start, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. If, we put the plan together, we're talking about the actual implementation side. And I think we might have actually talked about some of these points, through that dialogue. But would you mind talking a little bit more about what the actual implementation looks like?
Yeah, I think first of all, we have to define where we're going. Again, we're going back to that why, right? That why is very important. And I don't know if I shared with everybody earlier, and I'm going to go a little bit probably on a tangent here, but there was a study done probably 10 years ago that looked at when districts were first starting to work on their digital divide. And it was a study done on 1,000 school districts across the country, all social economic backgrounds, different size districts, that all got devices, got internet access, and allowed their students to be one-to-one. And what that study showed was that only 33% of the school districts were successful with what they wanted to do. And that's alarming. That's a big investment by, 67% of these school districts that didn't reach where they're trying to go. And the biggest hurdle that was discovered for those that failed is they didn't define the why. Why are we doing this? We've got to define the environment. It's why are we doing it? What outcomes are we looking for? We've got to implement those. Where are we trying to go? Are we going to be a blended learning environment? Are we going to be personalized learning? All of those things have to be defined as part of our implementation, and that's what we're striving for. Once you've defined where you're going, one of the things that's really great is it gives you an opportunity then, Ken, to create a sense of ownership, right? Now that people understand where we're going, and if we go down to the next point where it's coaching that learning community, right? If we understand where we're going and we've defined it, we can now coach people and help them achieve those goals. And remember, that second level digital divide that we talked about on, I think earlier in the presentation, really focused on, are we providing the tools necessary for people to excel? And this is where the implementation really comes in. We've defined who we are. We've set outcomes. We've set expectations. We're providing coaching and literacy and learning for all of the stakeholders. And that then starts to create this sense of ownership, not only for our instructional people, our teachers, but our students and our parents, because we're defining everybody's role with this, and we're creating that sense of ownership. And then we're going to monitor the community engagement. And we're talking about community. I don't want to confuse this with just parents, right? This is our learning community, okay? Is our staff engaged? Are our students engaged? Are our parents engaged? Our community members, business units out there that are supporting us engaged? And I think once we start to get that implementation going, this is a great environment, and Ken, that's really where a lot of that excitement comes from.
Got it. And then how do you, so monitoring community engagement, how do you actually see, so I've been in districts where the community is very involved and you get a vibe, you get an energy, you can sort of tell, but how else can you measure that or monitor that community engagement with today's tools that are available?
So there's a number of ways, right? There's virtual town hall meetings, there's surveys, okay? One of the things I have seen is, you're right, Ken, in some districts, there's a lot of community and parent engagement, but it often is always the same parents and community members that are engaged. And that can be good and bad, right? That can create a false narrative too. And so what we have to make sure that we're doing is that we are reaching out to all and finding the best ways. And it could be through our messaging system. It could be surveys. It could be, on our website. It could be many, many ways, but we have to explore all of those so that we're getting the feedback from all stakeholders, not just the ones that are going to pat us on the back, or not just the ones that are always complaining either, right? We have to understand from everybody.
Got it. All right, thank you. So let's move to the next slide, and let's talk a little bit about, something that it's along those lines of measuring, but your evaluation part, right? The saying, inspect what you expect. So we talked about expectations early on, and now we're talking about, how do you evaluate that and make sure we're measuring and that, we're showing that growth? Because last thing everybody wants to do is spend more money and have the same results. So what are we doing here?
Great point. This is the one that maybe excites me the most as we work through our plan, because one of the things that I've experienced over time, working with a lot of our educational partners, is that we haven't done a really good job of evaluating how the technology is being used. We've implemented it, we've gotten it in the hands, we've provided professional development, but we're not going back to measure, are we really reaching those expectations or those outcomes that we've set? So we have to clearly, as part of this committee work we define the tools that we're going to use to do that. We might have an outcome that says student engagement. Okay, like we want to integrate technology to increase student engagement in our district. Well, how do we measure that, right? So what tools are we going to use? Obviously, attendance becomes a tool. Okay, is our attendance up? Those students that didn't come to school, are they now coming to school? That's one way. Are students now turning in? Are we getting more homework assignments turned in versus what we used to get turned in? Okay. But again, I'm just using some examples, but we have to define the tools. And some of that is, it might be surveys of students, okay? Or taking a small group of students quarterly, randomly, and talking about how is the technology integration working for you? Doing the same with staff, small focus groups to get feedback. So it's not just one flavor or touch to measure what we're trying to do. We have to define the tools. And yes, we want some that are going to touch all, but remember, in surveys, we can't often get the narratives, right? So we need to do surveys plus focus groups. And I would say tools like that for all stakeholder groups are what need to be done.
Bill, would you say, I feel like this is probably one of the things that doesn't always happen, right? We roll out something new, we get it going, we're excited, but then we don't really go back and ask, did it really make that impact? Or we think it did, but we don't really have that documentation. So I agree. I think it's probably the greatest opportunity for districts to re-engage the community and stay engaged in the community. But I know there are challenges along with surveying, right? Like surveying too many people too often, and and also just trying to get the districts to fill out the surveys that we need for funding sometimes. So just how do you keep that connection where they want to have that feedback? Is it just seem like that it's making a difference? How do you do that?
Yeah, Ken, I think you're right. We can survey too much and then we just don't get the participation. Okay. But I think the surveys have to be short and they have to be pointed. Now, one of the things that you started to talk about was, the feedback. Are we hitting our goals? Again, this is a journey. This is not a task we're going to complete and be done. So when we set our objectives, we may have set objectives that made a lot of sense 6 months ago. But as technology has evolved, as things like COVID hit us, right? We need to be able to adjust. And the only way we're going to be able to adjust is if we're constantly evaluating where we are and are we achieving? Because a plan is great. Adjusting a plan can be even better, right? We don't want to necessarily stick to a roadmap we built that may not be relevant anymore. And I think by evaluating, and I know that kind of goes against surveying too much, getting too much feedback. And I'm not saying every month or, I'm thinking quarterly, semi-annually, getting that feedback. But we have to understand, again, it's going back to that reality piece. Who are we? Where are we? Based on what's going on in society today, funding today, all of those things that we have to address. And then, so I hope that help clarifies, defining the tools or getting the feedback.
Okay. And differentiated tracks. So I think this is probably one of the greatest opportunities that's available, is being able to speak or meet people where they're at, right? I've heard that term. Is that what we're talking about when we're saying differentiated tracks? And who are we talking about differentiated tracks when we're talking about this?
That's exactly what it is. So I guess I don't have to talk about it anymore. But no, it is differentiated based on the stakeholders. We do a great job in education, and I'm sorry, I can't say the word we because I'm not an educator, but education does a great job in its common core curriculum defining differentiated learning for students, right? We have individual learning plans for students that need it. And by the way, probably every student should have an individual learning plan, but that's another soapbox we'll talk about another day. But when we look at this and we say differentiated tracks, it's not just for students, but we've got to meet teachers where they are. So often we set goals and we have expectations, but when we're talking about providing support to that staff, we have to meet them where they are. Every district has rock stars that are great with technology and are advanced, and then there's always those teachers. And believe me, I've not met a person in education that's in it for the wrong reasons. They have passion. It's about the students. It's about the community. So we have to make sure we make them successful, and we got to meet them where they are, because if we can show them, and I'm talking about staff right now, but if we can show them the impact this can have, the excitement, the way it can elevate a lesson for a student, if we can show that to them and provide them the support at the place where they are, they will get there. They will go. They're not in this business for the wrong reasons. But the only way that's going to happen is if we can meet them where they are and help them succeed based on what our defined outcomes and expectations are. And that even falls over to home. What is a parent's role in this? Are we defining that for them? Are we communicating that to them? Are we providing them parent universities so that they understand their role? And I'll throw a big one out here. What is their role in digital citizenship? School districts are sending home devices right now. But from a security standpoint and a digital citizenship standpoint, what is a parent's role? Have we as an educational community defined that for parents so that they know how to better support their students, or what to be looking out for, or what questions to ask? And I think that's another track that kind of shows, Ken, where we have to meet people where they are, understand what their role in this is, and be able to provide them the learning that's required to be successful to support their students.
Got it. And I think that's a really key element, right? Meeting parents where they're at in the technology journey, because a lot of them, school in the last 3 years went from 0 to 100 really fast with a lot of tech coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, as a parent, I've seen numerous tools being introduced, and I've had to go through a lot of on-demand videos of how to set it up, or how to watch this, or how to check my child's grades now, or how to see what the homework is, or how to inspect. And on the same note, also understanding that, like, they don't have to live on their device.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Not all homework is in a device, and no school really assigns 8 hours of being on an iPad or on a Chromebook, but a student might do that. So I think that parent engagement and really making sure that we're differentiating the training for them and making it available really makes a big impact to that student outcome.
I couldn't agree more, Ken. And you talked a lot about the tools, and that's absolutely right. The tools that are used in education, where are the grades, those types of things. But I'll still go back to, are we doing justice for our parents if we're not also helping them understand what their role is in their students' digital citizenship? And I know you as a parent, and I know you personally, you're very engaged in that. But I know that there are a lot of parents out there that students bring devices home, or maybe they have, their own personal, smartphone, and we have to make sure that that we are working with our community members to make sure that we're creating a safe environment for our students. They are the future, right? So let's teach them early. Let's teach them right.
Got it. All right. And then the last bullet here, pushing that integration technology and challenging. I think you've said it a few times now. This is a journey that doesn't really end, right? This is ongoing.
It's here to stay. We looked at things like during COVID, where we were doing remote learning. Okay, we looked at distance learning, and what the past 2 years have shown us is that those are tools that are not going away. Even though we are back in the classroom, we're still using the tools that we've learned over the past year and a half, and it's going to continue to evolve. And I think when we look at that, and there's studies out there for high school students, right? And we know that the education system that we're looking at today was based off of, the industrial age, and it was about, a bell schedule, and we all understand that, right? But what we see today is that there's studies done that high school students learn their best learning time is from 10 a.m. to like 6 p.m. But yet we make high school students show up for school at 7:45. Okay. And we might be teaching them calculus at 8 a.m. And we know it's not the best time. But I think what we're seeing is that schools are starting to evolve and saying, okay, we talked about differential tracks, and meeting people where they are. Let's start to leverage what's the best learning opportunity for our students. And as technology continues to expand in education, it's going to create those opportunities. And so we have to keep evolving and challenge ourselves to look at the opportunities where technology can support learning and create the best learning environment for all stakeholders.
Got it. All right. Well, I believe in that. So let's talk about the next slide, support, and what we need to do on the support side.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier. It's beyond the bricks and mortars, right? Education is no longer 8:30, 7:30 to 3:30, whatever the school's hours are. It's no longer that. We've got students taking devices home. We have districts we work with that students get 2 devices. They get one for in school that they don't have to transport home with them, and they have one that's been assigned to them that stays at home. So, it's really, there's some things that are out there that are quite interesting. And with that, we have to create the support models to say, hey, you know what? It's not just Monday through Friday anymore, and it's not just from 7:30 to 4 p.m. How are we going to support moving forward? When it's a Saturday morning and a student wants to do something and they can't get in because their password needs to be reset, how are we supporting that? Are we saying wait till Monday? Because when we talked about this environment earlier, we talked about engaging, right? We talked about elevating. But if I now have to put everything that I want to do on hold, I'm not going to be engaged anymore. It's not something that I want at that point in time. So one of the things we see is that creating environments for self-service, right? That's kind of like those portals that are available that we see, for us, as adults, we might see it with our banking institution where we can reset our password, right? Or someone might do it with something like Facebook. But are we taking those tools that we're using in our school districts, and are we creating self-service portals so that users, whether it be a parent or whether it be a student, or a staff member, okay, or a board member, can start to salvage their day by being able to solve what might be an issue at that point in time. And then the other thing is we got to look at how do we support beyond 24/7. How are we going to do this? Are we going to create a service desk or a help desk or an email address for parents to be able to email in after hours so that they can get support? Saying, hey, call between 7:30 and 4 p.m. may not work for a parent that's working. They may not be able to get that. So, we have to think about how we're going to support this new learning environment from a technology standpoint. Asset management is big. And Ken, maybe you can help me here on talk a little bit about some of the tools and some of the things, that we might be using in districts as far as managing, those remote devices, controlling them, some of those types of things.
I think there's been, with the increase of devices getting rolled out, we are seeing more and more mobile device management platforms. And I think the big questions that go through districts' heads are, one, how do I track all these devices, right? Now I have assets that are no longer just in my building, they're everywhere. And some of them are traveling across borders, some are going across the globe. So how do I track that and how do I protect them? And I would say there's never been more tools available than today, where we have there are different platforms that you could, if a device needs to be locked out, you can push a button and lock that device. If a device needs to be wiped and cleared, you can do that. If you need to reset it, you can do it remotely. You can track. So if somebody is, you could integrate some of that to some self-services, right? So you can reset your passwords, you can do things, you can find your device. Now, what I was tell you is a lot of districts, and when we say maximize, are not going through what those options are within that investment that they have. And they didn't realize that, oh, I didn't set it up to track where that device was, because in the past it was always in my building. And maybe I just need to check that new box, because now when they're out there, and unfortunately, sometimes, parents come to us, hey, I'm trying to track my device. Can you help me find it? Or a device was stolen. Can you lock that device? Can you see where it was last? Those tools are all available. And also the ability to protect those students, right? And when I'm talking about protecting them, one is just content and making sure, they can't get to the content, but also realizing that digital citizenship is so important there, because no tool can stop anybody that wants to get to something. They often find a hole, they find a way. And those are our future leaders, the ones finding new ways to innovate and leverage things. But we also have safety items that come to the top, right? Student safety, and being able to use tools that can track those things, keyword searches, things that are written down in documents, and flag and raise awareness, so a district can get ahead of that and help those students in whatever situation they might be. So, we've seen all of that as, I don't want to say a positive of all this remote learning and going, but we have seen the tools getting leveraged in ways that a lot of people didn't realize, and are having significant impacts on really reaching and helping those students. Go ahead. Did you want to add something to that, Bill?
No, I'm so happy you brought up the point about, safety, right? Because we have seen, and we've had real world examples that because of these tools, intervention has happened, and
Yes.
and it has helped students. And that that just makes you feel good at heart when you're working with districts and you're helping them and you're putting these tools in place. And not only are we helping educate students so that they become our future leaders, but hopefully we're putting some safeguards in there so that we're helping students that from making bad decisions at the wrong time. And I think that was an important message.
Absolutely. So community-friendly support programs. Let's talk what that means, because we have seen this where and I'm going to tie this back to that 365 a day a year now model, because school used to be however many months and you had your summer off. Those
Yep.
devices aren't coming back during summer now. They're staying because schools need the extra time, students need the extra time to continue to close that gap, that learning gap that happened over time. So what does it mean to create community friendly support programs?
Well, I think that really comes down to is, when are we allowing parents to bring potentially devices in for physical support? Um, is there time for a parent to come in and ask questions and get some professional development, or those types of things? And it can't, again, just fall on the hours that the school is physically open, right? I mean, you mentioned summer break, but we still have winter recess. Okay, we still have spring break. We've got summer break. Some parents can't get their weekdays. Are we addressing those parents that the only time they might have off because they're working two jobs might be a Saturday morning? We've got to meet our community where they are and provide the opportunities for them to get the support that's needed. And I think that's what we're really looking at, is how do we create that environment so that it meets the needs of everybody that's part of our learning community. And
Got it.
probably the last piece, Ken, and I know we're starting to run out of time here because we're only going, and very passionate on this subject, both of us, and we could go on for hours and hours. But is look at your cybersecurity posture, make sure that you're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing, make sure that you have a procedures and policies. I can't reinforce it enough. Education is the largest growing area for bad actors in the world right now. And I don't know what else to say than please, please reevaluate this frequently, often, and make sure you're doing the best that you can with what you have to create a safe and secure environment.
Yeah, I think cybersecurity is a whole nother webinar in itself, just, the things that can be done. But I think the big takeaway is we're using the devices in different ways. More people than ever have them, and they're out there, and they're not within your four walls anymore. So how do you protect them all the time, and what's your policy procedure for doing that? And I think we can work, that we have a whole cybersecurity practice that can assist our clients if they need to build plans around that or figure out their strategies. But it's something that I think awareness is the important part, right? We have to educate them just like we do with digital citizenship. Cybersecurity awareness is part of that. So, all right, let's talk about the next slide. Let's move to that. And what does the integration look like over time, and how do you know when you're doing it right, and what are you doing when you're not there yet, or what are you experiencing when you're not there yet?
Yeah, so I like to look at this slide, and there's two ways to look at it. There's the integration of technology, and there's also our technology itself, right? Because we can have the best infrastructure, we can have all the devices, and it goes back to our very first slide, which where we talked about the digital divide, level 1 versus level 2. Okay, you can have all the stuff implemented the right way, okay, in level 1, and be, from a technology standpoint, in a value column. But what we're really focused on here is, are we doing the same from an integration? Are we highly engaged with our community? Are we interactive, innovative in our academic growth with the use of technology? And I think this just kind of drives home this whole presentation, Ken, is that there's two places with IT maturity, right? There's IT maturity with the stuff, and then there's IT maturity with, are we using the stuff the right way? Have we defined how we want to use it? Are we measuring ourselves? Okay. Are we getting feedback from all stakeholders? Is everybody engaged? Is everybody taking ownership in where we're trying to go? And I think when we get to that, then we're at that value add. And I think what we talked about here is that we have a framework to help you get there. And hopefully, if nothing else, you walk away from this with maybe some questions to go back to your team and say, hey, are we doing this? And if not, starts with a conversation, right?
Absolutely. So thank you for sort of tying that together. And if we could go to the next slide, when we talk about, where do we go from here? This is where we normally go, right? Is you mentioned, let's start with a conversation and talk through these things. And when we talk to you, these are the areas that we're typically going to touch on that might be challenges, or you might have objectives and goals that aren't being reached, or everybody doesn't understand them. And we'd love to work with you, talk to you, find out how we can assist. And we included both our email addresses here. Feel free to contact either Bill or myself, and we'd be more than excited to work with you and see what we can do to help. And even if you don't need help on this side, but you need help with traditional technology, or you're used to working with us in just traditional technology side and support, and you want to get into more of our advisement services and understanding, how we can help you on this front. So, Bill, any closing words? I'd just like to say thank you. And what would you like to say?
We've left him for 1 minute for a question, so we did well. No, thank you all for participating. It's something we are very passionate about, and we really want to help you get where you're trying to go.
So if there are no questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you, and really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all for joining our webinar today. a recording will be sent out and also listed on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to attend any of our additional roundtables or webinars, they're all listed on our events page on diopath.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you.